Alright, welcome back to another day on the project. Today on Throttle Stop Garage, we're going to be looking at frame rails again. So when we last left the project, we were just finishing up some of the details over there with the rear end of the car. So we've got that all fitted up now. I'm happy with where it is. I've measured it a million times. And I've spent some time getting some of the brackets and other little things. We've made some more of these gusset plates. So I didn't bother showing you some of that footage. It's a gusset plate. It's really not all that exciting. But today we're going to cut apart the rails that we made in one of our first episodes, and we're going to try to get them at least tacked up. Maybe not fully done, but hopefully we'll get them fully welded into the new rails, which we built just a little while back. So we should now be back on a logical track, I hope, here for the next little while on the build as we get rolling with some of the other front suspension parts. The frame needs to get done, and then we need to get engines and transmissions and other more fun and interesting things put into this car. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you the difference between the two sets of frame rails. It's reasonably obvious, but again, I said that we were going to make these higher. Right, so we're going to make them about 1.5 inches taller than these rails in order to, in essence, reduce the size, the height of the upper control arm part. Right, so I'd like to get that a little bit low, just so it's not quite as flexible up at the top. And done quite a lot of work actually on the engineering of that part, the upper control arm bracket part, so that it's going to register to the rails nicely and be able to be kept in line. Somehow we'll know that that part's true. So we've already got the back end bit. Now we know that the lower control arm, because of the way the arc is here, is going to run into this curve. I know that already. And we'll get that whole part tacked up so that we're sure everything is perfectly square and level, and all those other things that were driving me crazy with the old cross member. We'll get all those parts fixed. So we'll get them tacked and perfect, and then we'll just kind of intersect the two pieces. We'll just grind off and cut away the back arm piece until it all fits up and is level to our reference plane here. So anyways, I'll just I'm going to take you off the tripod and we'll take you for a quick tour around. A better view of things in here. So as you can see, not only do we gain this little bit of height here, but we've also, the way that the bend was able to be made, again, these were bends that I bought from the folks over at Welders Series, and their style of bend where you assemble them out of parts and then you weld them together and then you can cut them apart, but their bend radius is fixed. Well, the folks at Art Morrison were able to give me quite a bit tighter bend radius, which actually is going to help. In fact, it's a bit more clear on this other rail. So, you know, two rails aren't perfectly, they're aligned at the front edge. But you can see here the difference between the two rails. And my footwell, where I'm putting my pedals, was just barely, you can see I've got, well, that's just a mark I put on that rail, but that's about where the other rail was going to foul this particular piece. So it was going to come in and sit very close to this, and then go off. Now, I didn't really think that was going to be a problem initially, and I don't think it would have represented one, but the way this bend radius goes, I'm going to easily clear that particular tight spot that is on the driver's side of the car. There's no tight spot on the passenger side, so that'll be just fine. And the way the rails were built, with them giving me such a long bit of waste material out the back side here, then I'm going to be able to move, if I needed to, I would be able to move the bend sort of anywhere along this line, right? But I did give them this dimension here, so I wanted all the rails lined up nicely along the front edge here. So we've got them lined up along that front edge, and if I wanted to play with it even more, I guess, you know, I could have had them give me a little bit more this way, but this I think is as close to good as we're going to get. So today what we're going to do is cut apart the welds, which we put in before. So we'll cut those off, because this rail is on a taper, remember the bottom side of it is flat and the top side of it is at an angle, then we can't really afford to move back. You know, that cut line has got to be right where that cut line is. So I'm going to break out the grinder and get those parts cut. Old rails cut apart, we're going to just quickly drill the pattern that you've just seen me lay out for these little gusset plates. Okay, so we're just adding those in about halfway through. We're just going to put a 6-hole pattern on this one. I'm not going to bother with that other hole in the middle. It really doesn't serve much of a purpose in this case. Just a 5/16 drill is what we're doing those. But anyways, so let's just bust those out. Keep working. Center hole that I put in there, that'll be off.
Okay, I think that's going to be a wrap on the frame rails. We've just finished up the welding over on that one. I was only welding sort of one a night. It was stressful enough just to get them done. Now, what you would have seen then just a second ago on the stop motion was me having to actually bend these back just a little bit. Actually, it looked like a lot, but it wasn't a lot. So when I welded them, again, remember we talked about that before, whenever we heat metal, it's going to contract. So try as I might, you saw how I had it clamped up here. It didn't matter. There's tensions that are going to develop within the metal. So while they're still hot, all I was doing there, I mean, on the other side, I actually did have to resort to putting a little bushing underneath. And just the metal's still warm, still sort of malleable a little bit, and I'm just giving it a little bit of a cold relax there. So, you know, pull the clamps off, clamp it at the back. Give yourself a pivot point. In that case, I put it right underneath the weld. I know it's pulled. Okay, so it shrunk. I need to stretch it a little bit to get it back to about 0. Now, it's an imprecise science, as I've just checked the rails. They're now at 1/10 of a degree, so the table is flat, and they're a 1/10 of a degree low here at the front edge. I quite honestly don't think that's going to matter. So as I put them in, what I'll probably do is balance it off so that this is level. So I'll just put a little shim underneath the front edge. It doesn't even amount to about a 32nd of an inch. We're talking about over the entire length, so it's nothing. If I can get this stuff installed in the car that accurately, I'll be surprised. But I'll get this settled out a little bit. I'll level it up to the frame just because I know in my mind I need a level surface to work to. I also had to worry that I was, you know, the weld deposit on the bottom that was sitting on it, especially on that rail. I had a terrible time on that rail. Again, you may not have seen it. I was sort of half in the way on the stop motion, and I'm sorry about that. But with all the clamps and stuff in the way, I was really fighting. Uphand TIG is not actually all that difficult. You just sort of have to, there's a rhythm to it. It's never, I mean, again, I don't weld all day, so it's never as pretty as when you get to do it in the flat position, but it is the proper way to do it. Please, even if you're MIG welding, please don't down weld, don't downhand those. So that just means the direction of weld travel. So we want to be going up, right, so that we can take the heat. We can make sure we're fusing the root of the weld. That's what we're trying to do here. So I've seen a lot of guys with the MIG go down, right? Well, it creates a prettier looking weld than having to fight it against gravity to come up. Just doesn't create as sound a weld. I mean, again, if you're doing it all day, I don't want to hear from you. You know, we're home gamers here working in the garage. We're not professionals, so let's use the best technique that we can. It's the most difficult technique, which is to go up. Actually, I remember one of the first things I ever welded when I was learning how to weld when I was a kid, and the welder actually made me learn uphand first, because everything else seems like gravy after you've fought with that. I think I was about 12 at the time. I didn't appreciate it then, but I do appreciate it now. At any rate, so these are now level-ish, give or take a 1/10 of a degree. That's not too bad. They didn't pull or rack or anything else, you know, on the way in. What you were seeing me do with the MIG is I was backing up the root of the bottom, right? So I did put those gusset plates in on the sides, right? But I didn't put a gusset plate in on the bottom, and there was a reason for that. I knew I might have to bend it. I didn't want to give myself too much to fight against. So all I've done there is give myself a good beat on the back. And as I look at it, I can actually see, and I'll bring you around in a sec, but I can actually see sort of where the MIG, because I can't, you know, at the end of the MIG gun is really quite big. I just weaved a little bit over the top of it, but I can see the TIG coming into the corner. So I did fully penetrate it with the TIG, but it gives me a little bit of backup on that weld. I'm happy with that. I also used the MIG for that final fill on these outside buttons, mostly because I could get access to it, and I had the MIG out, and I was starting to get a bit concerned with the amount of heat that I was putting into the rail. And the MIG actually, if you go quickly, it puts in less heat. So you weld hot and fast, right? And it doesn't tend to heat. quite so badly. And you can see the evidence of that is everywhere. So if you look at the heat affected zone here, right on that area that I've button welded with the TIG, and you compare that to the heat affected zone over here, it's worlds different. So yesterday when I was first welding it, I was freaking out a little bit because you almost get a sense when things are going to pull. I knew this one was going to pull, and they both did. So I just wanted to get those kind of dabbed in there, and good enough. They're not going anywhere at that point. So anyway, that's a wrap for this. I'll just show you a couple of the details, and then I'll go watch the hockey game. Okay, so I think we can see that now. So we've got our reasonably big MIG weld in here, but you could just see creeping off over here on the edges on both sides. That's the back side of that TIG weld. Okay, so we're all the way through it there on the back side. Super happy with that. So it's fused. It's not going anywhere. Again, we've got to get all the rest of this stuff painted up now inside the rail, and then we're good to go. Okay, so that uphand TIG. I'm gonna just see if I can get an angle so you can kind of see. Oh, he sucks. Anyways, it's not what I'm doing these days for work, right? So I'm pretty pleased. But you can see the difference in the heat affected zone, right? You know, and I wasn't pouring the coals to it when I did that, but there, look at the difference. MIG just on the caps versus, you know, TIG on the caps. So, or on the buttons. Anyways, it doesn't make any difference at all in terms of the strength of the finished product. It's all just fine. And then